Hey guys, Pat here. So this is my review of Spider-Man Homecoming, the new release from Sony and co-produced by Marvel with the help of Kevin Feige, because now Spider-Man is part of the MCU after Civil War. So my review's very late, and that's because I saw this movie probably 2 weeks ago, and then I watched it again recently. And after the second time I watched it, I was able to kind of structure a review in my mind, and I could figure out a way to articulate how I felt about this movie. Because the first time I saw it, I really couldn't figure it out. It wasn't I couldn't figure out the movie, I couldn't figure out how I felt about it. Sometimes that happens, and what's really difficult about a movie in the theater is that you don't always get the opportunity to go see it a few times like you would on television or on DVD. So I had to wait a little while to wait for the ticket price to drop. See, once movies are out longer, you can go see a matinee for like $5. So the first time I saw this movie, it was still full price, but when I went and saw it the second time, I was able to see it for $5. So it wasn't that big of a deal. Um, but okay, let's just get to the review. I don't know. I'm giving you the history of how I saw this movie. That's really stupid. So my feelings on Spider-Man as a character, just to give a quick summary, going back, is I love Spider-Man like a lot of other people do since I was a kid, a teenager, and onward. I have a Spider-Man tattoo on my right forearm. I've read pretty much all the 80s and 90s runs. I've read most of the big issues, the big novels. I still read Spider-Man occasionally. I don't like all the Spider-Man stories over the last 10, 15 years. I saw the Raimi films in the theater. I saw the Garfield films in the theater. Not Garfield, Mark Webb films. And then I saw this film in the theater. So, needless to say, Spider-Man's in my top 5 when it comes to superheroes. Like, he's right there with Daredevil and Batman and Mr. Miracle, which are just, like, the top 3, probably. With Spider-Man, the thing that's so amazing about him is that Spider-Man's always been a real guy. That's a charm about him. It's the difference between Bruce Wayne and him, really. Why Batman's lovable because you really love Batman, and Bruce Wayne's he's cool, but Batman's the character. That's what defines him. Peter Parker defines Spider-Man. So he's someone who, like, he rides a bike, or he has to go to school. He has to deal with everyday problems, paying bills, talking to family, dealing with a boss, getting yelled at, taking photos, stuff like that. That's what makes this character so compelling. Is the guy behind the mask is really who it is, and it's a lot of the basis for the Marvel characters throughout all of it. It's really what the MCU is. It's the people behind the superhero persona. But it was never better done than Spider-Man. And Spider-Man became such an iconic character because the costume's probably the best design I could think of. I think it's just brilliant. Peter's really relatable and lovable, and he has a pathos that other Marvel characters don't have. And the reason he's kind of the Batman for Marvel, he's like their flagship character, is simply because he's just really compelling and iconic instantly, and you can relate to him, and he doesn't feel so perfect. And there's a lot of great villains. His rogues gallery is terrific. His side characters are terrific. There's just a lot of reasons to love Spider-Man. There's endless material and possibilities with the character. This franchise, though, in the movie series has been very weird. Because you got to go back and think. We had Spider-Man in 2002, and it was this huge hit. It made $114 million back then. And I saw that film 3 times in the theater. And then we get a reboot just a few years later that kind of fails. I like the first film in that series. I don't like the second one, but there was a failed reboot. Andrew Garfield was let go. They didn't agree with things there. And Mark Webb didn't get to finish that franchise. It's very weird. It's very similar to Michael Keaton's Batman films, where he was Batman for 2 movies and they just drop and go with these new Batmans. So then we get Tom Holland, who they introduce in Civil War. And this is his first big Spider-Man movie. This is produced by Sony, who produced the other Spider-Man flicks, but Marvel's helping them this time because Spider-Man's part of the MCU. So the deal here is that Marvel gets to use Spider-Man in Avengers films, and Sony gets the help of Marvel. That's why the budget on this film isn't too big. They were going way over budget on the previous films. And there was just a lot of good decisions here that felt like the Marvel brand really helped this out. This has that Marvel structure. It's got Iron Man, Tony Stark in it. Robert Downey Jr. is one of the biggest actors in the world. It helped the box office of this film. It helped legitimize this film to a lot of people that might have been cynical about a new Spider-Man flick. Because there is franchise fatigue with the character. And I certainly felt that way while watching the movie. And it's not the movie's fault necessarily, but one thing I realized on my second watch was that there's just a deja vu feeling. There's a moment in this movie where Tom Holland comes in and he's crawling on the ceiling in his bedroom or something with the mask off, and that shot is in the other Spider-Man flicks. And I've seen that shot in the comics a lot, and it doesn't bother me. But there's something about in a movie seeing the same shot over and over again. It's just, it's like somebody should retire this. Spider-Man can't crawl in right now with the mask off up, on the ceiling and jump down. They kind of they do something different with it, but I don't know. There's moments like that in this film. If there's an issue with it, you watch this movie and you've just seen some of the stuff in it visually. Not necessarily in the story totally, but visually you've seen some of this stuff before. So it doesn't have that exciting pop that it would if you didn't know Spider-Man. And there's been so many Spider-Man movies, and Sam Raimi did a really good job visually more than anything with, great cinematography and camera work and nice editing. The train sequence in Spider-Man 2 is really well done. Some people think it's dated now and the CGI doesn't hold up, but still from a filmmaking standpoint, right, the actual camera work and how Raimi puts it together, it's very well done. I mean, if it needed a touch up on special effects, that's a fair point, but if you actually go back and watch it, it's like, wow, this is really well blocked and thought out. And I think this movie, if anything, it lacks that kind of punch that Raimi brought to it. The director's a very good director with character interaction and making small scenes really work, but he's not exactly a spectacle director, which the movie didn't need. And the action scenes are tense and exciting in these very small, close quarters ways. They keep everything really on close-ups. It's not big special effects CGI. It's usually on the Vulture or Peter Parker, right on their faces, or when something happens. A little bit too much quick cutting for my liking, except for a couple sequences. But I think these action scenes could have been classics if the director was willing to just go a little bit further in the second unit and adding a little bit more punch and dazzle. Because I really did like the approach they took here. They went for intensity over just like special effects. But I think they could have done more with that. It felt like Daredevil on Daredevil's on Netflix did a lot more with the same kind of approach. And it's kind of like, okay, why is a TV show better than a $175 million movie? So the setup of this flick. Peter Parker is basically trying to get recruited in the Avengers. Tony Stark is testing him. He lets him keep the suit. Happy Hogan, Jon Favreau, is watching Peter. And Peter's basically just a high school kid in this flick. And the director goes for this John Hughes approach. Very 16 Candles. He succeeds and doesn't at the same time. The movie's the best part about the setup is making Peter a side character to the whole Avengers phenomenon and Marvel. The fact that he's trying to be with Tony Stark and Tony Stark's telling him, like, hey man, Captain America would have kicked your butt if he wanted to. And, Tony doesn't even communicate with him very directly. He has to talk through other people. They have a very distant relationship. It really works. It's a good idea. It's not exactly what I would have maybe done, but it works for an entertainment point of view. It's very entertaining to watch Tony Stark kind of screw with Peter and act like he doesn't care, but he does care. And they have a very fun relationship. It's a fun idea. Peter going out there is not one of the main guys in the Marvel universe. He's a guy that's, stopping your small criminals, your muggers, your people who steal bikes. He's not even doing the stuff Daredevil or Jessica Jones does. He's doing very small scale stuff. He's trying to prove himself. He's got to live his normal life, more so than even Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield did. This kid really feels like he's in a closet. He really feels like Harry Potter, where he's, and it's fun. It's very YA, and that's the approach as YA. They're definitely going for reading a YA book, some movie for teenagers, but it's a decent YA flick. It really is. Like, Tom Holland's very good. The other kids are good. The tone's very nice in those sequences. And it feels like a high school movie that's also a Spider-Man flick. And that makes it feel fresh. It's a fresh approach to a superhero flick. It kind of reminded me of Chronicle. And you're getting these parallels between being a teenager and a superhero. And sometimes this movie's cloying. And Peter Parker's cloying. But the thing about it is that teenagers are cloying. And that's kind of the charm of it. And there's a charisma from Tom Holland's Spider-Man as he gets subtle confidence through the movie. And that's really interesting. So, basically, Michael Keaton's the Vulture. He's the bad guy. He was he was a construction guy, and then he got fired. He gets to keep some parts, some alien weaponry from the Avengers attack. And now he uses the weaponry to steal and keep building up his company. And he's a blue-collar guy. You get to know his character pretty well for how little screen time he has. And I think Michael Keaton gives the best performance in the movie. It's a very magnetic, gripping performance and goes back to his 80s work. And Tom Holland's really good. He gives a very physical and fun performance. And I think the other actors are okay. There's a girl in this movie that's there as like the hipster. I'm going to say really clever things to other people and be smarter than the adults. I hated this character. I hated Juno in this. It really bothered me. I didn't want to dislike her, but she was so... she was just that... She's that stereotype hipster... emo-esque, I don't know, just the gothic kids who smoke the cigarettes on South Park. And it wasn't satirical. She was just that character. And it wasn't that it was unfunny. It was just the rest of the movie had a realism to its comedy in a sense. It was very like, oh, that kind of joke would be funny. I could see that happening in real life. But her stuff felt forced to me. It felt sitcom. Didn't like her. Go to the action scenes real quick. Like I said, I like they were tense. I like the look of the Vulture. I like the CG. Although Spider-Man looked fake throughout the whole movie, but I think it was a lighting thing. Not great cinematography. Not great editing. A little bit too much quick cutting. Director's much better at the smaller stuff. Maybe bring in a different second unit on the next film. I just thought this could have had better action scenes. I don't think it's an action movie, so it doesn't hurt the movie that much. But when you're watching it, you go, that would have made this a little bit better if this would have had some memorable action scenes. They're not... Like, the whole ferry sequence in the trailer and all that's pretty cool. And there's moments that it's really nice. And Tom Holland's sense of wonder is always there. And he kind of sells it. But my favorite moments with him and Spider-Man in this is the smaller ones. There's a good scene. The best action scene's that one in Washington, where he's trying to save his friends and the helicopter's there and all that. That's pretty tense, seeing him up high. That's kind of interesting. If they had stuck with that, because that scene's all about him being scared from being up there so high, and he has to get kind of confident with himself and learn how to do it. That's a cool idea. I hope in the sequel they do more of that. Like him figuring out that he can do this and feeling really scared. It's pretty cool. But it's the only time I felt like tension, like real tension, and excitement during an action sequence in the movie. It's kind of the big set piece in the movie, in my opinion. I think it's the one that has the most pop. The script's the highlight. 6 screenwriters on this movie, and who knew it'd be so good. The script's actually the best part. I think the direction's okay. I think the tone's fine. The actors are all really good. But the script itself, the dialogue, the pacing, the characterization. There's a really good idea in here between Peter and Michael Keaton's character, the Vulture. And I won't spoil it. But there's kind of a twist in this movie, and it's a play on something that a trope in high school flicks or Degrassi on television. It's a trope of prom and something that happens on prom night and an interaction you'll have. And they play with that in a way with a superhero film context that's kind of awesome. And I think they should have done it earlier in the movie. If you see the film, you know what I'm talking about. If they would have revealed this earlier in the flick, like halfway into it, and then played with that and made that relationship the key to the flick, I think this movie could have been great, because it was such a good idea. It's the best scene in the movie. It's the best part of the movie. There's like a 10-15 minute stretch here that I think is the best part of the movie, and really brought the movie around for me. There's also a sequence where Peter Parker's under this rubble, and he has to get up from it, and he's like, come on, Spider-Man, come on, Spider-Man. That's a very nice human pure moment, and the movie at its best captures that. So it's got a really nice turn in the script that changes everything, and it's a reversal on the teen flick trope and the superhero film trope. So it's very cool. And then there's also these little political hints with Michael Keaton's character and the Trump era and the blue collar guy, the worker guy getting forgotten about and feeling left out in corporate America and in an ever-changing world, in a more global world. He feels left out. If we're going to talk about the political stuff, though, I got to say there was criticism this film would have PC elements, and that it would be a little politically correct because of Sony's bent with that, and Amy Pascal being involved. I got to say, it's not bad. It's not forced, and a lot of people are overhyping it. And Ralph the Movie Maker said he didn't see it at all. I don't know how he didn't see it at all. There definitely is some political stuff in here. It's not bad. Like, and I'm not talking about Peter and this girl that's black having a romance. That's fine. That's actually really sweet. There's a great scene where he talks to her and he gets confident. He walks away and smiles. It's really cute. None of that's an issue, really. That progressive stuff doesn't bother me. If it's like, hey, this high school has kids of different color, because I went to a high school with kids of different color. I went to a high school where there was Asian kids and Latino kids and black kids. It's weird to see a movie where there's only one type of kid at a high school in New York. So I don't have a problem with the multicultural cast. The PC elements that I noticed was, yeah, Michael Keaton's character is definitely the Trump voter is kind of what they're leaning towards, which isn't a big deal. That's actually okay because they don't overdo it. But there is stuff with that hipster girl where she's like, this was built by slaves. And then the teacher's like, I'm sure it wasn't built by slaves. And then he walks away. There's a lot of moments like that where they mention Native Americans and they say you can't call them that or something. I can't remember. There's just things like that where it's like, don't say those things. That isn't politically correct. There's a lot of moments like that in the dialogue that feel really forced and out of place in this flick. Where it's like, why is that even in there? Like, just this progressive message, it doesn't make any sense. And I know some people are going to say that I'm projecting that onto this and it's not there. It's there. There's just lines of dialogue that's like directly like, yeah, that's like something an SJW would say to you if you said something wrong. I don't know if they were trying to make fun of it and it was a commentary on it. I just didn't really get why it was in there because the movie didn't need that political leaning. It's kind of this surrogate father story and this tale of two fathers and Peter Parker growing up and growing as a superhero and his sense of discovery with his new powers, kind of like Tony had a sense of discovery in the first Iron Man or in Ant-Man, the sense of discovery. It's got that tone about it, and it's got a lot of heart. And it goes back to the Raimi heart that I think was missing from the Amazing Spider-Man flicks. And Aunt May's really likable. They actually acknowledge that Marissa Tomei's hot as any woman in her 50s ever could possibly be, and everyone's always being really nice to her. The last scene of the movie's hilarious. The last moment's perfect. But my biggest issue with this film, if I'm going to go back to it, go through it all, it's not the forced political stuff or anything like that. It's just mainly editing and structure and focus. It's kind of all over the place. It's like 10 movies in one. It doesn't know if it's this teen flick, this origin story, Spider-Man becoming Spider-Man, this Tony Stark thing, the recruiting for the Avengers, this story about the Vulture and Peter's relationship. It's just a lot of movies in one, and I think if they would have picked 2 or 3, and it shows the 6 screenwriters, if they would have went with a couple of these ideas and made that the focus, I think this could have been a great movie. Because it has a lot of ideas that other Marvel films don't have. Some of the Marvel films are just popcorn entertainment that you enjoy, and they're to set up the next movie. This film, on the other hand, feels like a film that actually had an idea and could have really been something if they had focused on that idea. And there were so many things I thought about. I was like, man, this could have been a great movie, like a classic, like a 9 out of 10. Like it could have really been like a Back to the Future or something. It could, because there's kind of a Marty McFly element to Tom Holland's Peter Parker here, and I think if it would have had a screenplay that picked, because Back to the Future has a lot going on, but Zemeckis and Gale pick like the thing to focus on is the parents and Marty's relationship, and then the Doc Marty relationship, and that's the most of the focus. This film doesn't have a focus. Aunt May's in there a lot. Tony's in there. There's a character that comes in that's like a robot for Peter. That's like his Jarvis. That character gets a lot of time. They just have a lot. There's a scene with Donald Glover. It's just a little overstuffed. It would have benefited from focusing on a relationship because you never really get to feel like Peter gets to develop any of these friendships or relationships because he has so many of them. I would have preferred if he had just developed that friendship or something. All the relationships are good, and I hope in the sequel they don't make a bigger movie with more special effects like The Amazing Spider-Man 2 did. I hope they keep the things about this film that worked, which was them talking at the lunch table or hanging out in the bedroom building a Death Star or going to dinner with his aunt. Those are the moments that work, and that's what the sequel should stick to and not go for more. Because really, I don't think this Spider-Man works in special effects and spectacle and big action set pieces. At his best, he's really likable when he's dressed up as Spider-Man and he's going to surprise all these people at a high school party, and then he decides not to do it because he knows he really shouldn't be doing it. And that's really cool. Those are small moments, and it's just Tom Holland in the costume. I think that should have been the focus. Instead, it tries to be a blockbuster and some other kind of movie at the same time. Too many cooks in the kitchen on this. Might have worked better without Sony's involvement. I don't know. Anyway, if I had to give it an arbitrary rating, which is really silly at this point, I guess I'd give it like a 7.5 to 8 out of 10. It's good. The things about it that I said were good are really good. But all the other elements, like the action scenes and the cinematography and the music score and the dialogue, even, they're all just okay. But that's just how I feel. Anyway, guys, please remember to rewind your VHS tapes before you take them back to the store, because it's a big hassle for the employees to do it. And thanks for watching.